So Milla, thank you for coming in today. I've really enjoyed watching your journey from when I first saw you at the start of the pandemic, back would have been last March. And where you were and where you are now, I think will bring a lot of hope to people in chronic pain. As well as that, I think practitioners can learn a lot from your journey too. So I think we'll start off here by actually having a chat about your journey. You can share as much or as little as you like, but I think your journey was a really powerful moment for me. And I think it really shows the power of actually listening to the person that's here.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you also for having me here today. And even just this, opportunity to share my story and how healing this is as well. So, yeah, I guess my journey, Lord. I was thinking about where I would start this, and I thought to put it in a nutshell, if you can. I wanted to actually go back to my early 20s because I think when I look back at from like the perspective of my chronic pain journey, really, it kind of had already flared up and started way back then. Although I had no idea that that's what it was back then. But I have, these memories of having this persistent lower back pain that I didn't know what to do, and going from GP to GP and physios and, being told about pelvic floor and all this and that. But yeah, so if I kind of think about where it kind of really started, it was by the time I was in my early 20s. And by then too, like now that I know so much about chronic pain and how, the more holistic approach to it, by then I was having quite severe anxiety, I was having a lot of mental health issues, I had a lot of inflammation in general in my body. So I think like it had all kind of already been well on its way by then. So where it kind of really became almost this, quality of life issue to the point where it was almost completely debilitating, was after I had experienced a very severe tragedy in my life. So nearly 7 years ago, we lost our eldest son, and I'm going to say under tragic circumstances. I think losing a child under any circumstances is clearly extremely tragic. So I think I was already in a bad place in my body, but obviously going through severe trauma such as that was basically the nail in the coffin for my body and my health. So from that point onwards, what happened in my body was, just quite unfathomable to me, really. Like, I think the amount of tension that came into my body, which again, back then I had no idea what mental trauma and emotions did to my body physically. Like, I kind of wasn't, it's almost like I knew, but I didn't know the impact that was having on me physically. So my body just shut down. My body stopped working. The amount of tension and pain that went into my body, I used to describe it as my fibromyalgia. I can't even say this word, because it was like just this constant aching. But then it became like these, flare-ups of where I was already storing like this chronic pain. Like my back just became unusable. I completely stiffened up to a point where, like, for someone in the early 20s, actually, with how severe it was, it's funny, I would remember, I had this severe, very vivid memory of watching people walk, older people walk, and being fascinated and terrified at the same time, going, how can they do that? And that was to me like a real sort of light bulb moment of how bad I was, the fact that I found people walking like this sort of unachievable thing because of how much pain I was in my own body. And it kind of went from bad to worse, because I think obviously the first few years of dealing with grief, it's all building and happening, getting worse. But where it really started coming out is say about 4 or 5 years down the track, when sort of the grief was coming to a place where I was able to start picking up things in my life and picking up quality of life again, where I was starting to sort of integrate into activities and into adult living again, and starting to sort of, do a little bit more with myself. That's when it really hit me, because so I started dancing, and then, you think, oh, that's really great, I'm moving forwards, I'm doing something good for my body. But because of where I was with the chronic pain and the tension, and I guess that trauma that was just sitting in my body, that's where the injuries started really coming out. So, basic movements that most people deal with quite well would then end up in severe injury. So I ended up having problems. Like the pinnacle of it all was when I hurt my back, and that made me lose consciousness multiple times, and I ended up in hospital. And then I couldn't walk for a long time, well, not for a long time, but for quite a while after that properly. And then from there, I guess this was the lead up from when I came to see you. It was, my nervous system almost developed this response that, hey, when I feel anxious or unsafe, and I already was suffering from anxiety and panic attacks by then, but it now learnt that it could send me, it could switch me off. So then I started losing consciousness. So slight bit of pain or anything in my body, you're going out, we can switch you off now. So that was sort of the mess that I'd kind of come to, as my lead up to coming to you, that I was in this almost self-fulfilling prophecy where pain would lead to anxiety. So if I got a slightest bit of pain, I got anxiety, but then anxiety would set off even more pain, and it sort of just fed itself. It was just this black hole that I was sitting in.
So what was the meaning of the pain to you?
The meaning of the pain to me, it's a funny question, it's almost like I couldn't even clue on to what was happening for a long time. I was very confused for a long time to what the pain meant. I didn't know where it was coming from, so there was a lot of confusion and frustration and anger about it. But also, I felt broken, just completely broken. And I was a young woman who also from the outside, I think too, what was so difficult, I looked fairly fit, right? And people would look at me and they didn't even understand how broken I was and felt inside. So what it meant to me is I was living with sort of this demon inside of me where every movement was just pain and effort and just terror and anxiety around it. And it was just debilitating, but it was something that no one could see and understand. So it was very lonely and frightening.
And that was one of the questions that we asked you was, do you feel strong? And your response was what you've just explained, and it gave a bit of an insight for me with what was going on as well. Now, when you've seen other practitioners before you'd seen me, what were the messages that they were giving you about your body?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny because, again, quite scary to reflect on in a way, and this is no dig at anyone that I saw, because I know that there was also a lot of help that I got from these people, and I've got to give them that credit. But I think that misunderstanding of the approach to pain and what it is, where it had, I guess, detrimental effects, is the way that I was being treated by these professionals. It almost consolidated the idea of how broken I was. It always fed into that, that I've got no autonomy over my body and what's happening in it, that I am broken, that there is something physically wrong with me that constantly needs adjustment, and that every time it goes out or flares up, that the only way to give it some relief is to be back in their office. The fact too that, they would talk about the activities that I was doing that to me were, slowly but surely giving, I guess, a reason to live. So my dancing and my horse riding, those two activities, they gave me something to do, they gave me passion, they gave me a purpose again. But because of everything that was going on in my body and the injuries that I was happening, basically the messages that I was being given is that these things that I am now living for, and the things that are kind of, not just helping me survive but thrive, also the things that I'm being told to do are breaking me and are making me worse, and are making my pain worse, and I shouldn't be doing. So then it's almost this element of guilt that comes into doing the things that are actually mentally helping you have purpose. So that was...
It's such a tough time, wasn't it? Because you had mixed messages. You were wanting to do all these things that made you, but then everyone was telling you that you can't do that, it's going to damage you more.
And then I went into them fearful, and that anxiety would bring on tension, which would make me more likely to injure myself. So again, it was this self-fulfilling prophecy of you can't do this, you're broken. So unfortunately, and also I think just no real, the fact that I was there year in, year out, and sometimes week in, week out, the fact that I was having to go there week in, week out, and almost if I went for 2 weeks and I'd feel broken and say, "Oh, get me in now," that's not quality of life. And I knew that, I was starting to understand that, but I didn't know how to break out of that because I was broken.
So I suppose for me, when you first came in to see me, what were your expectations about what I was going to give you here in the clinic? How was I going to support you on this journey? And I'm thinking it's going to be very different to what actually happened.
Yes. So I was recommended to see you by someone I was speaking to at a gym by one of the trainers there. And they said, go see Matt, he's got a really fantastic approach, you can often find, the underlying reason to whatever thing's going on in you. But for me, that was still very biomechanical. So for me, I was like, okay, so I've got this pain and everything in my, I could, here, I'm hurting. So there must be something up the line here. And I was like, all right, Matt's going to find biomechanically what's wrong with me.
I'm going to find that one problem and I'm going to fix everything.
And he's going to fix it. So I very much came in from that physical approach of there's something physically wrong with me, and you were going to find where that physical thing was and you're going to fix it.
And when you started telling me your story, what you didn't realise at the time was I had an hour gap after you, and without you realising it, I extended your appointment by an hour. So, and we talked for 2 hours.
Yeah.
We didn't actually do any hands-on treatment at all.
Yeah.
We just talked, and I listened to your story. And how important was the actual listening to the process?
Yeah. It was really interesting because I think when we first started the discussion, in my head I was like, oh yeah, here we go, we're ticking off the box of my history, so he knows my background, which is what a lot do. It's like, and the whole, yes, well obviously that plays into things, it's like, yeah, so I'm like, here we go, here's my background, here's my history, let's get on the table and please find a physical problem.
Yeah.
So in a way at first it was like going through the motions, but I think what changed was I think first of all, you had commented, because you got me to just to stand up and sit down, and you mentioned look how stiff you are to go into just such a basic action. So I was like, all right, he's really seeing me, how I'm moving. That was one thing. And then as we were talking, I think the depth of questions and the follow through of questions that were coming from my story, I was like, oh, I can actually open up and give you more details because you actually wanted to know. And I'm like, well, there must be something more as to why he wants to know. I guess, do you know what it is? It's I've said this in a few different situations. I remember even having this thought of when I was talking about say even teachers or dance instructors or writing instructors, you can tell when someone's invested in you. You can energetically feel, your gut tells you when someone's really invested in you and wanting to teach you, wanting to understand you and help you, and when someone's just there to do the job, fill the hour, right? So it's almost I could start to feel that the questions that you were asking and how you were asking, you really wanted to understand it, and it was really important for you to hear that story. And that is what helped me go, okay, I can actually let you in on this because it's obviously important for you to know. And it also started letting me understand that, hey, whatever he's asking is obviously related to why I'm here. So yeah, it was huge.
Massive.
Yeah.
And your story was certainly, it was a journey.
Yes.
That is for sure. So after the first treatment, we actually, I think, got you in the following day to actually do a little bit of hands-on treatment, just to basically reflect on what we'd uncovered. But another big moment, I think, for yourself is when we actually gave you enough knowledge to start experimenting with your body a little bit there. So we got you to relax your body, start to move, start to bend and see what would happen. And one of the most exciting parts of my clinical journey over the years was actually when you brought in the video of showing me how you were moving when you were stiff to how you were when you actually consciously let go and allowed the body to move. And the excitement in your face when you were explaining it to me was brilliant, because that was a big shift in your understanding about how pain works and about how movement is. And what I saw was hope.
Yes.
There was this big hope that was starting to form. And the book we gave you, Pain Heroes, I think was another important part of that journey, because Pain Heroes covers basically 5 people that go through their life with pain and how they got to the point of living well with pain. And that was probably a notion that you'd never even thought of. And it was just, that was also another important part of that too. How did you find that I'm part of it?
Yeah, really good question. That book yeah, I feel like I need to get copies of it and hand it out to people. I know. You're so right. Like, I think, like, I feel like the first few pages of reading it was like, oh my goodness, there are others out there. Like, it's like this connection of my stories, not this freak accident that, like, no one else understands. It's like, I'm not alone. It's like, others, like, you know, even like reading the language they used to express around their pain and their quality of life, and a lot of them were like younger people too. I was like, that's me, that's what I felt. You know, their journeys. I think it was quite confronting to read, because I think some of these people too, like, I think as I was reading, like, I had this enormous sense of gratitude welling up in me that I had met you and that you had given me this book, and and this was like I was just like starting on this journey, because reading some of these people's experience, some of them had been through multiple surgeries, and I was like, far out, like, I was probably on the path of something like that down the track, of like, and I'm like, how counter, I guess, intuitive and necessary that is to what the body's going through. I was like, they've been through like really heavy painkillers, or antidepressants, and like the amount of anxiety and panic that they lived with, but like for such a long time with no knowledge of it. And I think I could relate to that, and it was almost like piecing together this picture of what I've gone through, like that, the pain, the anxiety, the mental health, the depression, like how it wasn't like these all separate things, it was one and the same thing. And also the fact, because I think we get so hung up on this idea of like, my back hurts, there's something wrong with my back, right? Or my knee hurts, my knee, there's something wrong with my knee. To hear the different types of chronic pain, like there was someone that, like, their chronic pain that their body always chose to express whatever was going on was like migraines, right? Or someone else, it was like their knees or their back. And I was like, and it reminded me of this quote that I've read from this other guy that I follow on Instagram, and he talks about how the body doesn't need permission of how it expresses things. It basically doesn't ask our permission on how it deals with things. It deals with things how it deals with things. So whether that's going to be expressed in a migraine or back or whatever, it doesn't mean that, like, almost like the underlying reasons aren't physical. It's almost just like that's just what your body chose to go to.
So along that journey, you started to reconceptualize pain. Instead of being about damage, it's actually less about damage and more about the body's need to, let's say, protect you, but it was what the body thought was best for you at that moment. And probably because there was so much fear, anxiety, everything sort of sitting around it that was feeding it, playing a role with it, intertwining with it as well. Then I think on about the third treatment, we actually mapped out your journey on the whiteboard to help you understand why your body was reacting the way that it was reacting, and how important was that to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, again, the different modalities of input of information, and just like, I think visually, like, whether, I know we're all different learners and stuff, I think for everyone, seeing something visually is quite important, and almost like a summary, seeing that visually, it's quite important to process how everything that you're talking about and these things that are coming up are actually linked. And also because you kind of see it all at once.
So it helps you make sense, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's, I guess it was also very, like, it's almost like this consolidating thing of like, well, no wonder I feel that, like, look at all of this. Like, I guess seeing that very tangibly helped it almost become very tangible to process in your mind of what's going on.
So I moved it from a very biomechanical way of thinking about pain to more this holistic, what we would call now the biopsychosocial approach, which is everything in your world and how it intertwines together. And I think that can be an important thing. And I know that I created a video for you to take home, and I'm not sure how many times you watched that video afterwards, but that just helped you to reflect on it and to think about it. Then from that point, we did this thing called the life bubbles, where we had pain as a part of your life and what life was around it. And we wanted to make life bigger around the pain. Whether or not the pain went away or it stayed, we're actually going to shift our focus to actually what you loved. What made Milla? And you came back with movement. You love movement. Movement's so much a part of you. And so,
ironically, yes.
Yes, it was. And you were being told, do not move. And in reality, dancing, horse riding, all these things which were just so important to you, really came up in that life bubble. And How did you find doing that bubble? Was that a really good experience to work through it?
Yeah, I think that very necessary one because and anyone with chronic pain, because even from like the Pain Heroes book, something a lot of them talk about is pain becomes your life. And that was definitely something that I related to and made me very emotional when I even read it in that book, because literally like your life revolves around your pain. Like you start altering what activities you do and how you start altering like what you have in the house or how things are almost like set up. You start altering how you have your seats positioned, like how cushioned it has to be, like what you allow yourself to do in a day, what route you might take. Like it's literally like your pain becomes the central theme of your life and everything has to happen around it.
And to realise there was an alternative.
And because you think because like for whatever reasons are behind the pain, I remember you saying the pain is still real. So it's like you know, for you to go, hey, like we're actually going to start shifting that from the central focus. It's almost like how. But to see that like, okay, pain can be part of the life, but there's all these other things that also make you and make your life again, and putting that visually I think is so important, because it makes you again like realize, hey, like there's so much else that I can focus on, and I'm still doing the ironic thing is I was still trying to do those things, but my focus was here on pain. Whereas it's like it started going, all right, I'm going to focus on these things and let them expand more, and the pain can kind of just start kind of.
And the irony of that is, it actually gives the pain less power.
Yes.
And in the end, it becomes less and less of a focus because we're concentrating on life again. And that's what I think is a really powerful part of doing that. We don't make that the intentions, as a big intention. We want the person just to focus on what's important in their life rather than trying to get rid of pain.
Yes.
But to allow the two to occur together can be really powerful. So that's really cool.
I'm actually glad you just said that, because I think it's that idea that the two are allowed to exist together. You can have quality of life and do what you love even if you have pain. Because for me it's almost, I think mental is like, I can't actually have quality of life until I'm rid of pain, but I don't know how I'll ever be rid of pain, therefore I can't have quality of life. So that's a really powerful point that you made.
You're sort of stuck there, that unless the pain moved, you couldn't live life.
Yeah, basically. So,
And I suppose over the months to come, I was so happy to watch you horse riding again, which you hadn't done in a long time. It was during lockdown, so it was through one of the most stressful times in all our lives. But how bad was the pain during that time?
Yeah, so I think for me, in many ways, lockdown was a blessing in disguise, because it gave me the time and space to actually start to, I guess, refocus how I moved, how I lived. I was simultaneously, like all around that same time, found a program through Heal Yourself and Move that were like very much about breath and releasing tension out of the body. So putting, I guess, those techniques with what I was learning from you, there's like this massive shift of where I started. The focus became okay, like how can we relax the body? And then seeing, hey, when we relax the body, that helps the pain. Then when you can relax and help the pain, and also take it as the central theme and still do things, like during COVID, I literally just found myself again. Awesome. So it was huge.
And that's what put a massive smile on my face, because I was following you through Instagram, and I was following your journey, because here in the clinic we only saw you 6 or 7 times. It actually wasn't a lot of times. But the change and the shift over time and watching you explore life again was really powerful for me. It was brilliant. Now let's reflect on a moment where a few months later, would have been about 6 months later, you came back to the clinic and you were quite distraught. Your back had flared up, the pain was back. Can you run through how that felt, that you'd come so far and then suddenly the pain was back?
I think anger and frustrated are the first words that come to mind, because anyone who's on this journey, a similar journey, would know how much work it takes and how much physically and mentally you're you're working through it. So to flare up and feel like you've gone back, and then in your back of your mind you go it's almost like crap, it's like, do I now have another 6 months of doing this? Am I back to square one? It's so disheartening. So to kind of feel almost like this, it was very defeated, I felt almost.
And you felt broken again.
I did,
They were the words. And I suppose the most helpful thing that I sort of brought up was that we weren't actually trying to get rid of the thoughts of I'm broken, the pain's back, I'm damaged. that they can still be there, but it's choosing how much attention we give that. And it's all right to switch our attention to more helpful ideas. And the fact that those thoughts could be there, I think was a really powerful thing, because you were trying to think, I was trying to get rid of those.
Yes.
But to be able to allow them there, oh, they're there, but I'm not going to give them much attention. I'm actually going to switch my attention to more helpful thoughts. And I think that in itself was a powerful time for you too, because it allowed you to see that we didn't have to get rid of all this stuff.
Yeah.
That we have choices, we have control. And yeah, that was really great, because your whole face changed in here over that sort of 15 minutes.
Because I think what it did is it, in a weird way, normalized it. Because it's like that whole thing of it's okay for that to be there, and it's like, oh, it's okay. Like, I can still, move, I can still live, like, it's okay. I think also that idea of, like, when you talk about flare-ups, and started priming me even on this idea that, hey, when you increase your activity or start challenging yourself a bit more, you might have flare-ups, and that's a normal part of, I guess, working through this whole thing. And I was like, and that, to be honest, is something I still take with me to this day, because it's not like I'm rid of pain these days. But it's that whole idea of like, okay, I'm having a flare up and it's going to be here maybe for a month, maybe 5, but like kind of like it will do its thing, but I can, like, it's not the same. Like what it does, and I think what it did in that moment, that experience you're talking about, is it takes out the panic from it.
Correct.
Yeah. Which is huge. Yeah.
So that in itself is really powerful. It's when we get caught up in that anxiety and stress about it, as you said, that fight off, more stress responses, more protective responses of the body. So basically it dropped the struggle. Yeah. So instead of getting caught up in, because they're still not nice, we still don't like it, but there wasn't as much struggle with it. And I think that is, a really, really strong moment. Now, do you want to explain to people how far you've come from last year to now? What activities are you now doing, and also competing?
Yeah, so how have I come? It's actually incredible. Like, I can't believe that, like, this is me in my own body. So now I'm dancing 4 to 5 days a week. And they're like, those days are 4 to 5 hours, sometimes stints. Wow. So when I say I'm dancing, it's like once a week. Like, I mean, pretty, training, quite high level training. So my dance partner and I do compete. Like every couple of months there's competitions that you're working up through. We've just actually gone up into a higher level, into graded events in our Ballroom and Latin. So the fact that, which again comes with, greater demand of technique and physicality on the body, and even like the amount that, like I'm learning to put into it. So my body's under pretty high level physical challenges. My riding as well is, I don't do that, like that's not the priority, but like, I'm riding a young horse who has been quite tricky temperamental wise. So I've had quite a few difficult rides with him where he's bucked, or where he's, been quite tricky to control, or, try to throw me out of the saddle. And like I've sat them. I haven't come off him.
And the video I saw is you were smiling when that happened.
I was. Actually, and that adrenaline junkie of me like come out a little bit. It's like I was able to find fun instead of panic in that moment. Because I think a year ago where I would have gone to is, I've just been bucked, therefore my back must have gone out. That anxiety would have caused tension, that would have fed into the pain. I probably would have lost consciousness because I would have put myself there because of how I would have.
And so you've been told that riding a horse was going to create more damage.
Yeah, I was strictly told that riding hurts your lower back.
So stop doing it.
And it was again one of those things that fed itself, because I have come off a horse a few times and been like, oh, my back doesn't feel quite right. And then my head's made it this big thing that's made me really lose consciousness. Like, and it's made the pain bigger than it was actually. So, like, the fact that I'm doing that, and the fact that I'm doing that too, like, now it's like been 6 months of this year, but it was also like last year, once lockdown lifted, I sort of started upping the ante. And the fact that I feel that I'm probably in a better physical way than I have ever been my entire life. And this is on the background of what I have been through. Like, I feel like I'm now in my, and this is something like I'm in my 30s now, like, like I have these big aspirations of where I want to take my dancing and what my body's letting me do now. Like, I feel it's like this sense of hope and knowing that, hey, I can actually achieve the dreams I have, as opposed to before where I was like, I'm broken, I'm limited, I'm an idiot for thinking that in my 30s I can actually be a dancer. Like, yeah, whereas like that, it's completely, that mental shift has been like completely different.
And this shift, have you seen other changes in your personal life with your own family compared to where you were last year? Have things shifted in your world too?
Yeah, they have. Absolutely. I think quite significantly I've noticed like even the idea that like even my son has of me, like the fact that he can come in for a cuddle and not feel like, oh, if I touch mummy I'm gonna break her or get yelled at because she's in pain. Do you know what I mean? Like it's horrifying, but that's literally all the fact that I can like come in and have a snuggle in bed with him and not be like, oh no, I can't get into your bunk bed because that's gonna hurt my back, so I'm just gonna like, all right, you know, like so I feel like there's been more physical closeness with my child because I haven't been scared of him touching me, and because you know how kids are, he's mental, like he moves around so much, and I used to be terrified of that because again I can't control that, and I can't, if I have to do a sudden movement in my body before that would mean it would go out and I'd be in pain, so I would avoid that. So it was almost like this subconscious distance that I had. I mean, on top of other things with like grief and trauma and things like that, but like that physical distance as well that I put there, you know, and it was always this, his perception because of what my husband would say too, is like, oh no, don't touch mummy, like mummy's fragile, mummy's broken. It's like, I hated that. I'm like, no, I'm a strong damn woman, right? And it's like, no, you're broken. So I think like going back to him saying like, and him saying things like, oh, my mummy's a dancer and my mummy's this, like that his perception of me has changed, and that's really, you know, huge for me. For my husband, it's really huge because like he's been so long, especially after losing our son, in this role of like, I have to save Milla, I have to look after Milla, and my God, he has done all those things. But I think for him going, oh my goodness, Milla can now independently do things. And that if I get a phone call from her, it's not someone going, yeah, your wife's getting picked up by the ambulance at the primary school because her back went out and she lost consciousness. It's like, you know, hey, like I just danced for 5 hours and it was amazing and I learned this stuff, and my, you know, trainers think like, you know, I had really beautiful mobility here, like, you know, the conversations are different. So, which is such a different energy in what we are as a family. We're no longer like this, like, you know, like the energy in the house is like, we're like, is more this uplifting energy and more active and happy. Like, it's just like, yeah, it's huge.
It's been a brilliant year for you. You've evolved and you've learnt so much, and you've had control throughout that entire journey. So we might just close it up now, the conversation. But thank you for sharing today, because I think it's going to give a lot of other people hope that things can change, that you can take back control. And for practitioners, I think it's just going to allow them to maybe think about what they say in the clinic, possibly extending their skills and evolving as well. And I think that's really, really important there.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I think one of the biggest things I would plead for practitioners to do is do not put limiting beliefs on your clients. Do not put limiting beliefs on their bodies, because they are actually capable of anything. They've just got to believe it. Their body's got to believe it. So, but if you as a practitioner in that role of authority, when they're the most vulnerable, are already saying to them, no, you can't, how will they ever? So I 100% agree.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching.